What's up guys, MizzoFrizzo from Pitchfork Academy here, and welcome back for part 2 of my how to create a Steam multiplayer lobby system in Unreal Engine 5 tutorial series. In this part we're going to be looking at adding a friends list and inviting our friends to join a session. So as you can see here, I've got this social button up the top right. If I click this, it will bring up my friends list and we can see who's online and offline, and we can invite them to the session, which is just this basic level. So we can join each other and run around on this basic level, which will eventually be our lobby level. But just for now, we're adding this functionality to see our friends list and invite our friends to the session. So without further ado, let me show you how to do this. Alrighty, the next thing we're going to do is start setting up our lobby level, but we also need a kind of load in level that the project will start up in when we start our game, and we'll use that level to create a session and load our lobby level. So with that in mind, let's go to the content folder and right click and create a new folder, and I'll call it levels. And inside of levels, what I'm going to do is click File and New Level. And first, I'm going to create a basic level, and this is going to be our lobby level. So hit Create, and then save this, save it in our Levels folder, and let's call it Lobby Level, and hit Save. And let's also go to File and New Level and create an empty level. And this one, we're going to save it in the levels folder, and let's just call it load in level. And this level is not really going to contain anything. It is just going to call a function that will create our session and load into our lobby level. But we don't actually want to do that in the level. We want to do it in our game instance, because when we change levels, a lot of these like game mode, blueprints, controllers, like they all get destroyed and sort of recreated in the next level that's loaded in. So we're going to do it in a game instance. In our content folder, let's also create another folder and call it blueprints. And in blueprints, we're going to right click and go to blueprint class, and then hit this drop down here and search for game instance. Now you'll see under game instance, there's also this advanced friends game instance, and there's absolutely no drawbacks to selecting this one. It has some extra sort of functionality inside of it that, you know, we may find useful at some point. So I'm going to select advanced friends game instance and hit select, and I'm just going to call this BP underscore game instance. We can only have one game instance in a project, so you know, just call it whatever you like. I'm just going to call mine game instance. This is created when you open up your game, when you load your game, and it's not destroyed until you close your game. So this is persistent. This is very good for sort of passing data between levels. So you will need it. And we do need to set this in our project, and we're also going to set this load in level as the sort of default level that's the game starts in when we start our game. So we can go to edit and project settings, and over here in maps and modes, you'll see we've got this editor startup map, which we can change to our lobby level. So when you open your project, it will open up inside of the lobby level. And the game default map is the map that the actual game starts in. When you've packaged it and you start your game, this is the first map that will be loaded. So this is going to be our load in level. And the other thing we need to do is set our game instance. So we can search for game instance, and right here, game instance class, you want to change this to the game instance you created, which for me is BP underscore game instance. And now that that is set, we can go ahead and do our logic that will create a session and open our lobby level. So we want to first go to blueprints and open BP game instance. And we're going to right click in the event graph and add a new custom event. We'll call it create session. And here we are going to create advanced session. And off of player controller here, you can just get player controller. And that's all we need to do with this for now. We're not going to go into changing any of these settings for now. We may revisit this later on. But now on success, what we want to do is open level by object reference. And here we can select our lobby level. And if we drop this down in the options here, we need to type in listen to sort of create this map as a listen server. So make sure you type this exactly correctly, listen, in the options here, or it will not work. Now, let's just call this on event begin play in our levels blueprint. So in our load in level here, if we click up here and open level blueprint, we can delete event tick, and on event begin play, what we're going to do is get our game instance, cast to it, so cast to BP game instance, and then as the game instance, we are going to call that function create session. Nice. And that is literally all we need to do in this level blueprint with the game instance. So this level will be loaded when we start our game, and straight away it's going to call create session in the game instance, which is going to create our session and open up our lobby level. Nice. So we can compile and save and close this. We can also close that level blueprint, and now we're going to head over to our lobby level. Now we will eventually need a game mode, which we will, will contain some of our logic. But for now, we can just change the game mode override to BP third person game mode. And if you don't have this world settings tab, just click Windows and World Settings. And I like to dock mine over here next to the details panel. And all we really need to change in this game mode for now is the player controller. So we're going to create a player controller. Inside of Blueprints, let's right click and create a new folder. And I'm just going to call it Lobby and open this up. And in here, what we can do is right click and go to Blueprint Class and Player Controller. And I'm going to call this BP underscore PC underscore lobby. So this is going to be our player controller for the lobby. And then you can click this and drag this onto Player Controller Class right here in our BP third person game mode. So obviously we're going to set this up with, where our characters spawn when people join the lobby, and it's going to have all sorts of different stuff in it. It's going to be our lobby, but for now we are just going to add the friends list so that we can invite people to this session. We're just going to start by setting up that functionality. So we are just going to be able to run around as the BP third person character. So let's open up BP PC lobby, and actually let's not do that just yet, because we're going to use this to spawn our widget, our main widget that will contain our friends list. So let's just create that very quickly. In our blueprints class, I'm also going to create another folder, blueprints folder. I'm going to create another folder called UI, and in UI, I'm going to right click and go to user interface, widget blueprint, user widget, and I'm going to call this W underscore, let's call it W underscore lobby UI. Like so. And we will add some things to this shortly, but now that we've created this, let's go into our player controller and into the event graph. We can delete event tick, we won't need that. And on event begin play, let's create widget. Let's select our lobby UI widget that we just created. Let's promote this to a variable and just call it lobby UI, just in case we want to use that later. And let's also add to viewport, and let's also show mouse cursor and set this to true. So we have our cursor, and we can also drag off of here and set the input mode to game and UI only. Set input mode game and UI. And the player controller here is going to be a reference to self. And the widget in focus, we can grab our lobby UI and plug this in here like so. Nice. So that's really the only reason we wanted to create our own player controller, so that we could spawn the widget from it on event begin play and change these input modes right here. So we can compile and save and close that. And the next thing we're going to do, like I said, we are going to add our friends list to this lobby UI shortly, but first we need to create a widget that will sort of it will sort of contain each friend, their name and their avatar, and an invite button. And then we'll also create a UI that contains a list of those friends, and then we're going to spawn that list inside of this lobby UI here. So let's get started on creating that friend widget first. So we can right click and go to user interface, widget blueprint, user widget, and this is just going to be w_friend, and open this up. We can start by adding a size box, and the size box I am going to make 600 by 80. So I'm going to check width override and height override here, and I'm going to make the width 600 and I'm going to make the height 80. And then I'm going to click here and change fill screen to desired so we can actually see the size of this thing. And inside of the size box, I'm going to add a horizontal box. And inside of that horizontal box, I'm going to add another size box. This size box, I'm going to override the height and the width. And I'm basically going to make it square. So I'm going to make it 80 by 80. And this is going to contain our avatar. So we can also grab an image and drag it onto the size box, and this image we can rename and call it image_avatar, and make sure that this is checked up here is variable. This means that we can sort of change it in the graph at runtime. We will add the player name next in this horizontal box, but let's put it inside of a retainer box in case they've got a really long name. So I'll put retainer box inside of the horizontal box, and then I will get text and put text inside of the retainer box. And the retainer box here, we want to check fill, and I'm also going to drop down padding here and give it, say, 5 padding or 10 padding on the left. And I'm going to center this vertically. Nice. And I might select the text, and we can drop down the font here. You can change the font if you like. Maybe not bold. Maybe 24 size is good. I might make it a little bit bigger. 28. And that should be good for now. Let's add an invite button over to the right here. So I'm going to put it inside of a size box. I'll add a size box to the horizontal box. And inside of the size box, I'm going to add a button. And inside of the button, I'm going to add some text. And the text, we can immediately change the content of the text to invite. And the size box here, I'm going to change the horizontal and the vertical alignment to centered, which just makes it look a bit nicer. It sort of doesn't fill vertically. We can override the width here, and if I just drag this out, there is another setting here that will sort of make this button look a bit nicer. It might be centered in the button. So if we select the button and align it centered horizontally and vertically. There we go. So this button has a nice sort of uniform size now. I'm just going to make this size box just big enough to fit that button. Very, very nice. And this button here, we can rename it, and it's going to be button_invite. And make sure that this has is variable checked. You can tell these are variables. We also need to make text block, this text block variable. We can rename it to text_player name, and also check is variable on that text block as well. You can tell they're variables because they're sort of bold over here in the hierarchy. So you've got the button, the text, the player name, and the image avatar, all variables. So we can change these inside of the graph. Let's head over to the graph now and start setting that up. So essentially all this is going to contain is two things: the logic to update the data here, the player's name and avatar, and the logic to invite that player when we click the invite button. So we can actually delete everything here and we can create a custom event, and I'm going to call it update. And we're going to need a variable here. It's sort of part of the Steam session stuff. It's a BP friend info, but we'll just call this, we'll call it friend data. And the type here, we can search for friend info, and you'll see this BP friend info. This is the one that we need right here. So select that one, and we are going to hold Alt and click and drag this out and set it. And then we're going to drag this pin onto the custom event so that we can pass this across when we call this update function. Off of here, we can break this. And what we're going to do is set the text of our player name based on the display name right here. So we can grab our text player name here and set text. It's this one under widget, set text text. Let's plug in the display name into the in text right here. Try and keep this neat. Nice. And let's also change the avatar. So we can also drag off of unique net ID and we can get Steam friend avatar. And on success here, we are going to set the image avatar from texture. So set brush from texture. On success, and the return value here we can plug into the texture like so. Nice. So set the name and the avatar, and let's also sort of make this widget less opaque if that friend is offline. So let's get our friend data once more and break it. And if we drop this down and we grab our online state here and find an equal enum, change this to offline, and I'm going to use this as the condition for a select float. So if they are offline, it will pick A, and we'll make this something like 0.25, and this will be 1, and we'll set the opacity of the entire widget as this. So we can just set render opacity. Oops. Set render opacity, plug this in here. Nice. And so if our friend is offline, it will set the render opacity to 0.25. And if they're online, it will just be 1. The other thing we need to do in here is just the logic on the invite button. So we can select the button invite here, and down here in the details panel on clicked, we can click this little plus icon. We'll add this event on clicked of the invite button. What is going to happen? And what is going to happen is we're going to send session invite to friend. Player controller, we can just get player controller. And the unique friend ID, we can get our friend data, break it, drop this down, and plug in the unique net ID right here. Nice. Very good. You don't need to do anything else after this. That will send an invite to them, which they can accept via their Steam overlay. But you could put print strings here. For example, just put a print string and say invited. And we'll put the other one and we'll say failed to invite ... something like that, just to give you some sort of feedback to see if this is working. But that is pretty much, that's everything we need to do in here. We need to now create our friends list, which will be populated by these widgets in a list. So it'll be a list of our friends. So we can go back to our UI folder, create another user interface, widget blueprint, user widget, and this will be w underscore friend list. And open this up. I'm going to start in here by adding a size box. And the size box is going to be the width of our friend widget, which, as you recall, we made 600 wide. So I'm also going to make this 600 wide and let's say 800 high, and I'm going to change fill screen to desired so we can see the actual size of the thing. And we can also give this a bit of a background, so we can grab a border and drag it onto the size box. And the border, it's already sort of filled that size box. What we can do is change the padding to 0 and change the brush color to maybe something a little bit darker. And let's make it a little bit opaque. Let's make this like 0.6 so it's a little bit less opaque, and hit OK. And then so now that we've got this background, let's get a vertical box to contain everything vertically. And we'll put a heading at the top of this vertical box, which we can use another border. So grab a border, put it in the vertical box. Let's give it padding of about 10. And we'll put text inside of that border. Whoops, drag it onto border and change that text to friend list or friends. We can't really see that, so let's grab our border and change the brush color to something a little bit darker. Nice. And let's make sure that friend text is horizontally centered like so. And I'll center it vertically as well. And I think this padding here on the border, I might just set that to, I might just give it padding on the top of 10. And I might just set the padding of the text inside of it to 10. That looks fine. And so next what we can do is add a scroll box in this vertical box. So let's search for a scroll box, drop it into the vertical box and select it, and make sure that you check fill on this scroll box so it fills the rest of this vertical box like so. Otherwise it will not work. And we will put another vertical box inside of it to contain our friends list. So find one more vertical box, drop it inside of the scroll box, and this we can rename, and this will be friend list. Make sure that this is set to is variable so that we can populate it with our friends in the graph. So I believe that this is all good like this. I actually might just set the padding on the top there to just 5 because it's just a bit much there. And actually, while I'm at it, I might set it to 5 on the left and 5 on the right as well. Nice, there we go. That looks a bit better. Let's head on over to the graph. And basically what we're going to have in here is some functionality that will sort of refresh the friends list every 5 seconds. So we can get rid of pre-construct and tick, but on event construct, we are going to set timer by event. And the event that this is going to call is a custom event that we'll create, and we'll just call it update friend list. We'll drag this delegate onto the delegate on the set timer by event, and I'm going to set this to 5 seconds and looping, and I'm also going to change the initial start delay to -5, and this just ensures that this doesn't delay for 5 seconds the first time. So this this being negative, whatever this is, will make this fire off straight away, and then it will keep firing every 5 seconds after that. Nice. So what we can do is we can find a very handy node called get and store friends list. And the player controller here, we can just get player controller. Oops. Get player controller. And the array that this outputs is all of our friends, but we kind of need to sort them between online and offline friends. So let's create a function, and we'll just call it sort friends. And this will need an input. The input will be friends, and this is going to be the friend info BP. And we also need to make this an array. So drop this down, change it to array, and it's also going to essentially output the same array but sorted into online and offline friends. So we'll just call this sorted friends, and it should already be BP friend info array type, same type of variable. Very good. And the first thing that we can do in here is we can create a couple of local variables. I'm going to call the first one offline friends and offline friends. And this is going to be BP friend info. And this will also be an array. So change this to an array. And let's just duplicate this one. And we'll just call the other one, we'll just call it friends. This is basically going to be sorted. So this is going to contain all of our friends. We'll just call it friends. And here off of this input, we can find a for each loop. And we need to drag off of this array element and break it and drop this down. And again, off of online state, we can find an equal enum. And we're going to check if these are offline. Hold B and click to get a branch. Plug this into the loop body. And what we're going to do if they are offline is add them to our offline friends variable that we created. So grab our offline friends and add. Plug this into the true. And we're going to add the array element to that array. Grab some reroute nodes and try and keep this as neat as possible. And if they are not offline, so if they are online, we're just going to add them to this friends array. So we can add them to that array like so. And then what we need to do when this is completed is basically take our friends array, and we are going to append it. And what we are going to append onto it is our offline friends. So we've sorted them into our offline and our online friends. So this one just contains the online friends. And then we're going to append this one onto the end of the other one. And voila, we have a list of friends sorted into online first and then offline. And then we can plug into the return node and just return that friends array like so. Nice. That's all we need to do in here. One last thing we can do is we can compile and save this, and we can select that function and we can make it pure. And we can close this now. And what we need to do is call that function right here. The input will be the results right here. And then we are going to use what it returns for a for each loop. So for each loop. But just before we go into that, and we sort of populate the vertical box, our friends list, with that array, we need to clear all the children from it. So we can grab our friends list here and we can clear children. And this is going to plug into the on success right here. And then we'll execute our for each loop. Nice. Okay, so this is basically going to go through our list of friends. And if we don't already have them, or if the length of the list of friends is longer than what we've already populated, it will sort of add a new widget, if that makes any sense. So what we can do is we can just create widget first, and we're going to select our w_friend, and then we're going to promote this to a variable, and let's call it added friend widgets. added friend widgets, and we can delete that and actually change this to an array. We can select this variable and drop down this variable type here and make it an array. And so basically we are going to use that to check sort of how many of these friend widgets we've added. So we can get our added friend widgets down here and get the last index. Whoops. And we are going to check if the array index here is greater than the last index of that added friends widget. We can hold B and click to get a branch, use this as the condition on a branch. And if it is greater than the length of this array, then we are going to create a Steam friend widget. We are going to first add it to the added friends widget. Add. And we are going to need this return value of the widget a few times. So I'm going to add a reroute node there. And what we're going to do is call the update function that we created inside of our friend widget. And the friend data that we're going to pass over is the array element from our for each loop. We're also going to need this a few times. So let's create a couple of reroute nodes, try and keep everything neat. And then once we've updated the info inside of that widget, we need to add this widget to our friend list. So we'll grab our friend list here and add child. The content is going to be the widget that we created. And that's all we really need to do there, but we will also need to grab these last two nodes here, and I might just grab the reroute nodes in case they help, and copy them down here. And this is going to connect to the false here, and we are just going to get our added friends widgets here and get a copy, and the index that we're going to get is the array index here. So I'm going to add a reroute node here, drop this down to here like so. Try and keep everything neat and aligned. This is going to be the target here, and it's also going to be the content. So we'll plug that in like so, and the array element right here can drop down and pass into the friend data like so. Nice. Try and keep this neat and tidy so these lines aren't overlapping too much. Very good. Okay, so that should all be working now. That is all we really need to do in here. We just need to add this friend list to our main widget that is spawned from the player controller when we start this level. So let's compile and save and close this, and we can also close our friend widget, and we can open up our lobby UI. And the first thing I'm going to do is grab a canvas panel, and then I'm also going to find the widget underscore friend list, drag that onto the canvas panel, and I'm going to select that friend list, and I'm going to check size to content. I am also going to anchor this over the right hand side of the screen here, and I'm not going to worry too much about its exact position right now. I'm just going to place it about there. And one other thing I'd like to do is just make it so that I can show and hide this friends list. So I'm actually going to search for viz and change its visibility to hidden. And I'm also going to grab a button, drag it onto the canvas panel, and this button I am going to anchor to the top right of the screen. I'm going to make it about 250 wide and 50 high, make it a bit chunky, and I'm going to put it about here, and I'm going to put some text inside of it, and the text is just going to say social. Nice. Change the padding to 0 and make sure it's aligned in the center of that button. And that button, I might also just change the style, color and opacity. Ah, that's the text. Background color. There we go. Just going to make it a little bit darker so it's kind of similar to the friends list right here. It just looks a bit nicer. Nice. And make sure that that button is a variable. And I'm just going to name it button underscore socials. Head over to the graph, and then we can delete all of these. I'm just going to get my button socials. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to click it, and I'm going to find onClicked down here and add the onClicked event. And onClicked, I'm going to get a flip-flop, and I'm going to grab my friend list and set visibility. Duplicate this and make sure friend list is plugged into the target on both. And on clicked, I'm going to set the visibility of my friends list to visible. And on the next click, I'm going to set it back to hidden. There's just a couple more things for us to tidy up, guys. So firstly, if you open your game instance, what we need to do here is basically destroy our own session before we leave it and join someone else's session. So what we can do is find a node called event on session invite accepted. And on accepted, we are going to destroy session. And on success and on failure, we will join session. And the search result here is going to be the session to join from the invite accepted node. And we just need get player controller here, and also over here. And this is on failure as well. Just in case this fails, we still want to join the session. Nice. And now that that's done, there's one other thing, which was a bit of an oversight on my part. In Blueprints and UI and in the widget friend over in the graph, this render opacity node is not the right node. We want to find set render opacity, and it's this function one under widget. So it has this target pin. Target is the self. The other node still works, but this is definitely the one that we want right here. And as you'll see in a moment, this render opacity logic here is not working correctly in a packaged build, which is a pretty small issue. It works in the Pi, which I find really strange, but that's something that we may be able to work out in the future. So once again, if this is on standalone and we hit play, nice. So we've got our social button here, brings up our friends list. We can see who's online and offline, and we can indeed invite them to this session. Just to cap this part off, guys, I'm going to package this project and show you it working as a packaged project and invite a friend to the session, and also just to demonstrate a small bug that I've encountered. Hopefully you don't encounter it as well, and maybe if you do, you might be able to find a fix and share it with me so I can share it with the community in a future part. So I'm going to go to platforms here and Windows. I'm going to change this to development, and I am then going to package this project. And I'll just package this here, and then I'm going to compress it, zip it, and send it to a friend so we can test it. Alrighty guys, so I've got my packaged project open and Steam open in the background, and as you can see here, if I click my socials button, I've got my friends list, and I can invite some friends to join us. Got a few friends here to help us out, but as you can see, we can't really see who's online and offline, and it has something to do with the opacity of this widget, this friend widget, not working in a packaged project, which is very strange indeed, because it was working in the Pi. And I have built this, I've set up this build 5+ times, and I seem to get a different result every time. Something not working every time. So you may get the same results as me, you may not, but as you can see, we are able to invite our friends and run around and play a multiplayer game together. So I do think that's pretty cool. Hopefully we can work out this bug at some point in the future. And if you encounter the same bug and you manage to find a solution, please do let me know, because I will want to sort this out at some point. It is driving me a little bit crazy, but it's not going to stop us from going forward. We are going to keep going forward with our lobby system. So if this tutorial has been of any use or value to you whatsoever, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.